Everyone, we switch to English for this session. So welcome on Big 2020. I'm very happy to have this session on tech and Singapore and to have our great speakers and partners. So for this session, we have a partnership with the Team France Export and the French Chamber of Commerce in Singapore and also with EDB, Economic Development Board in Singapore. Zéline and Marianne are here with us. And we're also lucky to welcome our speakers from Idinvest, Sophie, and Raphaël from Thales, head of the Digital Factory. We will hear a panel with them. But first, I will launch a video with our friends from the French Chamber in Singapore because they couldn't be with us because of everything that's happening at the moment. So we'll have a video with them. Then I will hand the mic to Zéline, who will and Marianne, who will take over and have the panel with Sophie and Raphaël. Thank you.
Dear big attendees, I'm delighted to welcome you on this workshop dedicated to innovation and tech in Singapore. Singapore is a vibrant and dynamic world-class hub in Southeast Asia. No doubt this is the place to be for an entrepreneur. So how to access Singapore? There are multiple entry points and players here to help you penetrate the market, and the French Chamber of Commerce in Singapore is one of them. We are a non-profit and self-founded association with more than 40 years of experience. We provide customized services to our 750 members and to French businesses to accelerate their growth in Singapore. Sylvain and Marie, our tech and services experts at the French Chamber of Commerce, will now give you market information and insights of the tech ecosystem in ASEAN and Singapore. Stay tuned.
650 million people in ASEAN. It represents 9% of the world population. ASEAN GDP was over 4% growth before the COVID-19. ASEAN is a free trade area since 2003 and the fourth most dynamic region in the world after US, China and India. Obviously, the region is very dynamic with a different population size, languages and cultures, and therefore different maturities of markets. We were the first in the crisis COVID-19, so we are the first going out. So it's time to prepare 2021. The situation accelerates the digitalization in all industries, particularly the e-commerce, whose annual growth in ASEAN is more than 32%. Thanks to three factors: emergence of the ultra-consuming middle class, a population over-connected with 3.5 hours per day on internet and mobile, and a world race for innovation in edtech, logistics, big data and AI. However, there are also sectors like fintech, Industry 4.0, which are very promising and search of new innovations. The financial sector represents 30% of the Singapore GDP, and they have the best digital banks in the world. E-wallets allow daily purchase for 150 million users from Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam and Malaysia. The increase in payments and money transfer on mobile requires blockchain and cybersecurity reinforcement. What about Industry 4.0? The deployment of 5G will accelerate the opportunities for companies on the Internet of Things and robotics. Industry 4.0 will have significant impact on ASEAN, given that manufacturing accounts more than 35% of ASEAN's GDP and is valued at over $1 trillion. Finally, fundraising in Asia increased by 11% in 2019 to $91 billion. According to the e-Economy ASEAN Report 2019, Internet startups in ASEAN received over $24 billion in the past 4 years, with the famous unicorns such as Grab, Gojek, Bukalapak, BNG, Sea, Revolution, Lazada, and so on. So, welcome to ASEAN and its ample opportunity for innovation.
Thanks to its strategic location, strong financing mechanism, and dynamic ecosystem, Singapore is known as a world-class technology center in Asia and a first-choice destination for tech companies. Singapore is geographically located in the heart of Southeast Asia and is positioned at the hub to radiate over the area. The Global Innovation Index 2019, which ranks countries' innovation performance, ranked Singapore as the 8th most innovative nation in the world and the #1 in Asia. Some key figures. 4,300 tech startups and 6 unicorns, as SEI, Razer, Trax, Grab, Lazada, or Bigo. More than 120 incubators and accelerators, and 150 venture capital firms and almost 400 investors. According to the e-Economy SEA 2019 report by Google, the digital economy in Southeast Asia could reach $300 billion by 2025 and increase $100 billion over the projection of the same report in 2016. Singapore's ambitions to become a smart nation is an opportunity for tech companies. Singapore is committed to working with partner companies around the world to design, develop, and test new innovative solutions, and has implemented several government programs to achieve this ambition. The key sectors for French companies are fintech, as Singapore is the world's 4th largest financial center, cybersecurity, as it suffers more than 11 million attacks per year, health tech, a developed country with an aging population, Industry 4.0 with a strong focus on renewable energies and IoT, and then agrotech. Singapore aims to produce 30% of its nutrition need by 2030, and not forgetting the explosion of e-commerce in the period of COVID-19 and future changes in subscription partners. Now I leave the floor to the panel and have a good session.
Thank you very much to the French Chamber. And now, Zéline, your turn. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marion. I'm going to take a side seat so that our guests are right in front. My name is Zilin Sim, and I'm the Regional Director for Europe for the Singapore Economic Development Board, EDB. I think our friends over at BPI France and FCCS have done a fantastic job in setting the context for why you should go to Singapore and ASEAN, Southeast Asia. And I'm very delighted to have two panelists, fantastic panelists from two very interesting organizations to share on their background and interest in Singapore and Asia. Our first panelist is the Business Relationship as well as Sustainability and Impact Manager at Idinvest Partners. Idinvest is a leading pan-European private equity firm with many successful stories. Madam Sophie Berry, please. Our second panelist is the Vice President of Digital Factory, Digital for the Thales Group. This is the entity within the Thales Group that accelerates digital transformation, helps the group collaborate with startups, and create new digital solutions. Could we invite Mr. Rafael de Cormy, please? Thank you. A bit weird today not to have any claps because we're having this event right online. But no, so to kick off this panel, please kindly tell us a bit about what you and your organization is doing in Singapore and Southeast Asia. Maybe you could start off with Rafael, who seems very, very excited to answer.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon in Singapore. Thanks very much. So yes, Thales has already a big footprint in Singapore with numerous services towards Singapore and Singapore companies. For example, in mobility, operating metro lines, also regarding aero support, even though they are impacted in the current crisis, as well as a big manufacturing footprint because we have our largest factory producing security elements for all type of identity elements, for example, or banking products. And clearly, it was the opportunity to grow it and expand those activities of more traditional activities to new digital activities.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you a lot more questions later. Maybe over to Sophie yourself. What are you and your Idinvest doing in Singapore and Southeast Asia, and why are you there as well?
Hello everyone. Maybe I should start by introducing a bit what Idinvest is, because I think we are less well known than Thales around the world. So Idinvest is an investment fund. We finance startups, European startups, but also global startups. And we accompany in particular startups in their international development. And so for us, it's very important to support the global development of our portfolio companies, especially in Asia and in Singapore, where we have been operating for several years now. And we also have a team there, based there, to network with the local VC ecosystem, to discuss with startups, identify potential investments. But I'll dig into that later.
Thank you very much. I think a lot of our audiences who are both online and physically in front of us are thinking about this question, from a rich experience with helping startups and working with startups. What are some of the concrete tips for startups to, French startups from here to expand into Singapore and Asia? Because in their minds is, okay, we're convinced by, FCCS video, we want to go there. What are some of the tips that, you guys can provide? Maybe Javier, you could start off first.
Yes, definitely going to Singapore, it's a great opportunity because it's a vibrant ecosystem. So clearly, any startups wanting to go there and expand business should really leverage this capacity. So it's definitely being able to contact customer where the level of digitalization is very high. So it's very easy to engage, and also the ability to really address a larger audience, which drive adoption is very high. Also, clearly in terms of academia and relationship with also large corporate, definitely a capability, especially if you're in B2B or B2B2C, a capability to expand very quickly. The fact that it's, let's say, geographically concentrated, and also the level of maturity is very high, it really helps to engage.
May I just add on, you talked about the ability to engage a lot of corporates, B2C, B2C. Is it because of the large number of Asian headquarters which are in Singapore? So you don't have to waste time going to each of the countries and...
Definitely, you have all the ability to connect locally, but it's also, as it is a hub for Southeast Asia and really the heart of the ecosystem over there, it's also the ability to expand and interact quickly with those players.
So you save time. You just talk to the one Asia CEO in Singapore and you have covered the rest of the region,
exactly,
right?
Very practically.
A bit like yourself, right? Maybe over to you, Sophie. You work with so many startups around the world, many French startups, and some of them are already in Singapore. Any concrete tips for them that you could give them to make their passage over to Singapore and Southeast Asia a bit easier?
Well, first, I think the current timing that we are in now maybe doesn't encourage startups to think about going global. I think it would be a shame to put on hold this thinking about going global, because even though now, of course, all the conditions are not met, it's important to think about it in advance, to anticipate, and to start building your international strategy. So maybe, on the contrary, now is the time to start building your network in this regional ecosystem. And why is it important to go to Singapore if you want to expand in the global Asean region? I think Raphael highlighted how massive of a hub it was in a very, very tiny concentration city. Really, everything is at your doorstep basically. It's a test bed for everything. So I think if I would maybe use a tip, I'd say going to Singapore or to ASEAN in general is difficult, just like it is difficult for a company to go global. In any country, it's difficult. For a French company to go develop the Belgian market or the Spanish market or the Swiss market, it's difficult. Sometimes people, we were talking about Montreal, about Canada just before, sometimes French startups or French entrepreneurs in general think it's easy to go to Canada because the language is the same. It's so different.
Except for the accent, a little bit different.
And the accent is different. The language is different, really, even though we can understand ourselves pretty clearly. But and so it's the same for Singapore. So it's very, very important to build up a network, a strong network, and to liaise and rely on organizations, either sector organization, business organization that can help. In Singapore, there's a very strong community of expats, of French expats. Yes. Singapore is home to the second largest French expats in the world, in the region, in the Asian region.
25,000.
It's really huge, and this French community is really bounded to each other and helpful with each other. So you should really try to get into that network because everybody's there to support you.
You know what, Raphael, I saw yourself nodding. How do you get into this this French network overseas. I have some French people tell me they call it the French mafia because they're so close and so friendly to each other. Any tips on how a startup can get into that network, that space?
Clearly, the fact that there is, let's say, the typical background and cultural things that we can share, but the fact that also the interconnection we already find in France between venture capital, between startups, between corporates can also be replicated or mirrored locally. So that's definitely something that's something to leverage when trying to enter this ecosystem over there.
I guess we can also use things like LinkedIn as well, because I think the community in Singapore is very friendly to speak to each other. And we touched briefly about the challenges faced by startups, right? Whether it's a French startup, a Belgian startup, doesn't matter, they all face challenges going abroad. Do you have some tips on some examples of challenges that they typically face, and what are the good ways to overcome them? For example, we talked about network. How do they get network? Are there other funding challenges, export challenges that you could think of? Maybe Sophie, you could.
I think sometimes it's the lack of knowledge of all the facilities that exist. Sometimes the government or businesses or non-profits set up in place grants and tax programs and ease of finding offices. Small things that everything put together can really help you accelerate and be a catalyst for implementation. And going global takes time. It's an investment. So if you can get those quick wins very easily, it's really helpful. And sometimes entrepreneurs don't use those those tips because just they don't know. So it's very important that that this information is shared, typically through those kind of workshops.
Yeah, and I remember that Idinvest, you also published a white paper, right? The challenges faced by SMEs going abroad. So please read that white paper to get some tips as well. Over to you, Hafel. I know we talked about, Thales is a fantastic company, a huge conglomerate with presence around the world, right? And yet you work with so many startups. Not many corporates are able to have that meaningful collaborations with startups, because most of the time the startup just cannot keep up, or they find that the main organization just cannot be as fast as them. How does Thales, Digital Factory, how can a French startup work with you in Singapore and grow in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, so our main priority, and this is really one of the role of the Digital Factory, is to make sure that startups don't burn too much gas trying to talk and trying to enter Thales as an account. So here our role is to facilitate. So it's basically, and what we can find in Singapore in terms of service is to make sure that we can navigate through the organization to give you directly the right contact, the right stakeholder and decision maker. It's also making sure we have defined, let's say, a simplified purchasing model, so that you don't have to go through all the difficulties of proving that you have a strong company with a track record, that everything is simplified and streamlined, at least to your 2 or 3 years anniversary, depending on the type of startup you are. And also, we do have 2 acceleration programs, one in Paris and one in Montreal, also echoing locally in Singapore, where we do provide, capacities to accelerate both in AI and in cyber. So clearly, this portfolio and this cohort of startups that we recruit, we are really promoting them throughout the company and throughout our customers everywhere, and especially in Asia, as they are coming from elsewhere in the world.
You sort of alluded to this idea. So if there's a French startup that's sort of working well with Thales here already, how can they make use of your network in Asia? Is it possible to then extend a POC, extend a further co-innovation project from France to Montreal, or from France to, for example, in Singapore? How does that process work?
That's a very good point. In fact, what we do in Singapore, and it's important to engage locally, as I was saying, because there is a great opportunity over there. So the idea is to make sure that we maintain this customer intimacy by continuously driving value to them and looking at what has been incubated or tested or elsewhere in the world and successfully with startup. We usually look at it and say, okay, here we have an opportunity to show our customer, to showcase to our customer in Singapore, but in the whole Southeast Asia area, what could be done, and if it makes sense for them. We have also the other way around, where we are. Where startups come to us with possible use cases, and we use Singapore as a local, let's say, sandbox area, if we can say so, to quickly test and iterate and improve the value, and then export it back to a regular business line or other markets.
So if I hear from you, Thales Digital Factory offers the expertise. You also offer the ability to help them navigate the different stakeholders within your organization. The branding is there, and you also have access to customer problem statements, so the startups can immediately plug into that.
Exactly, that's
ecosystem.
really the idea. And really, whether it's an internal new product launch, whether it's a startup within our ecosystem, we are using those local, let's say, comptoir touch points to be, especially in Singapore, to be the interface and to really interact with our customer and with the ecosystem.
I see.
I think this kind of model is really virtuous. At idinvest, we really like those kind of corporate strategies, discussing, building partnerships with startups. We also, our model is based on raising funds from investors, right? And among our investors, we have also big corporates. Global corporates, French corporates, Singaporean corporates, and the reason we do that is exactly the same reason you tell us you do that. It's because you want to find innovation in startups, and you want to drag with you startups in their growth, and you want to make it an exponential value creator through those discussions. And we as a VC fund, we sit in between those two guys, right? We sit in between the corporate, the LPs, and we sit next to the entrepreneur. And we aim to bridge this gap, both for French startups going to Asia or globally, but also to try to find Singaporean-based startups to do the other way around.
And I think you touched on the topic that I wanted to ask you a little bit more, actually, because idinvest has been helping a lot of corporates and startups all over the world to connect with each other. And I wanted to ask you, fundraising is always a key pain point faced by startups, right? Whether it's in Europe or whether it's in Asia. Based on your experience, for both regions, any tips for French startups that want to find some investors in Europe as well as investors in Asia that will help them in their growth plans? Any tips that come to mind?
I think what is important is to think of it as a long-term partnership, and maybe you could consider it as a wedding in a way, as a marriage. So just the same way as you're trying to find your husband or your wife, you should really consider if you are aligned in terms of value and where you're going to. The only difference maybe with a marriage, with a wedding, is that it's a closed-end contract. You know that you're going to get divorced at the end, right? Because as a VC fund, we have to exit, and the entrepreneur knows that at some point we will have to get take away the money to give back to the investor,
That's
right? But having said that, I think what is important is to have an alignment in values. So typically, idinvest is a fund that really wants to support the growth of their portfolio companies. So that's why we set up a local ecosystem for internationalization, but we also have strong values in terms of sustainability, for example. So we've recently made a public commitment towards carbon neutrality and inclusion. And we don't only claim that for ourselves as a company, but we also want to engage our whole portfolio in that end. So to answer your question, maybe idinvest is not the right fund for all startups, but I think a startup should try to find the VC fund that has the resources to support their ambition, whatever their ambition is. There has to be some kind of alignment.
Yes. So you have to do your homework as well when you pitch to an investor. Not just every other investor who offers you something, you should take it. I think you should check for alignment, not just in Europe, but also in Asia. And I think the fact that there is idinvest in Singapore, it's a very strong sign of their commitment as well as their confidence in our area. And I saw, Harfa, you've been nodding as well. My question to you is, if you see a startup, so many startups that are pitching to you to work with Thales, right? What are some of the things that you keep a lookout for that makes you say, this startup is a bit worth my time. I would like to work a bit more with them, so that the startups know how to prepare for their pitch when they ever engage Thales in Singapore or Thales in France or Thales in. What do you look out for in the startup?
So there would be, we are very aligned, that's why I'm nodding, but definitely there is, let's say, the typical things people look in startups. It's the size of the market, the traction, the team, and how much they are ready to execute. That's, let's say, the typical thing that you look. But in our case, in Thales, we also look at startups in their capacity to transform the group ourselves and to make sure also we build long-term relationship with customers. So this is those types of elements we are also looking to really recruit those startups in our programs.
I think what you're saying is that if you are expanding in Asia as well, you also want to look for a startup that also wants to extend in Asia, right? Because that will support your customers in that part of the world. So it's something for a lot of the startups to think about. We're running a bit out of time, so I wanted to just have this last question here. There are many, many fantastic points brought up today in a very short time, 20 minutes. What are one or two takeaways that you would like to leave with our audience here and those who are watching online? One or two takeaways that they should keep a lookout for, trends that they should keep a lookout for in the coming years. One or 2 points that could come. Maybe Sophie, you could start off as 1 or 2 points.
I think the hot topics is everything that relates to smart city in general. Smart city meaning mobility, meaning housing, affordable housing, meaning how you can pay for all those services, new retail, everything that we think about new retail, like very close proximity services for everyday job and life. Those are very hot topics, and it happens to be very
in
strong.
Asia as well.
Exactly. So that's one of the reasons why our smart city investment team is really active. And special kudos to Victor and Julian in Singapore. I think those are big trends, and that are particularly important in terms of sustainability and carbon neutrality, which are big concerns globally.
Great points, great points. Raphael, what about yourself?
Yes, just what we see really transversally in all our activity, which is either in the transportation, in aero, in defense, and in corporate security, is really this cyber security layer. And this is really this bedrock for trust is one of the key things that should really be increased, making sure that everything we build on top regarding digitalization and every plan we build has solid grounds on which we can build so that people continue to continuously engage and companies are able to continue push values toward their customers.
Great points. I think during a crisis, we always go back to the partners that we trust. We always go back. We don't try new things during a crisis. And I think you really emphasized that point. And Thales is a very important partner of EDB and the Singapore government. I think you've helped us secure many, many critical infrastructure, train, metro projects, airports in Singapore. So we're very thankful to have you.
And vice versa. Thanks very much for your partnership for those long years, able to increase our footprint and making sure we make a difference in Singapore.
Definitely. I want to thank both our panelists. I want to invite my colleague Marion, who's just going to wrap up the event for ourselves as well. Just very quickly.
Thank you, Jilin. So thanks everyone for a great session today. Thank you, Raphael, Sophie, and also Ott and Mahir, who had sent us the video from Singapore. So to very quickly wrap up the session and conclude today, we've heard that Singapore is in the heart of Southeast Asia, a growing and very sizable market of more than 600 million people, where digital innovations are accelerating in areas such as smart cities, cybersecurity, carbon neutrality as well. But there is a need to anticipate and take time to build those relationships, build the networks now for future expansion, even if we live in a complicated time now. So take this time to network, find partners, find alignment with those partners in terms of the direction you're moving in, the values that you hold, whether they're your industrialization partner or your investor. And these are all things that you can find in Singapore, a rich ecosystem of investors, corporates like Idinvest and Thales Digital Factory, all working in different industries. And in this very dense area, you will be able to find potential partners, engage with them, and develop new ideas to test, bait, and commercialize in the future. So if you want to explore this, you have a very strong French community backing you. You've got BPI France, you've got FCCS, and you've got the EDB, all here to support you with our connections to the networks and also through our platforms such as Big Today, but also other platforms for deal making, for commercialization in future as well. So please feel free to reach out to us. We are here. We're here to speak to you. So yeah, come have a chat. And thanks everybody again for your time, and have a great day. Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you, Marianne. So it's time for me to thank our speakers. Very a big thanks. Thank you very much for being here. And I will also hand the mic to Camille from our International Innovation Partnerships Service, who will say a few words.
Yes, thank you for hearing us. Just a few words about the event that will take place about BP France and the Singaporean market. So we will launch matchmaking, deep tech matchmaking open to all countries on the October 19th. So it will be open to all countries during the whole day, and it will be open to entrepreneurs and investors. So there will be a morning session for the Asian continent with France and an afternoon session for the American continent. So this is the international tech matchmaking, and there will be also an international mission organized by BP France to Singapore between the 22 to 26th of March. In next year. So for the entrepreneurs of the IoT market. So please, if you want to get more information about those two events, contact us at international.ino projects@bpfrance.fr. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Camille. Thank you, everyone.